We created this as a workshop rather than a webinar, basically just to informalize it a little bit. Ryan's going to walk us through a couple slides, and then we're going to get into some deeper GA4 stuff. Obviously, I feel like this is like a subconscious stress of a lot of marketing folks right now, this kind of pending end of the analytics that we're also used to. So Ryan, thank you so much for coming on and walking us through this as we near our deadline here. Let me hand it over to you, Ryan. I guess one thing is please use the chat, folks. If you have questions, like queue them up. The real purpose of this is to make sure folks are getting their questions answered. Oh, someone's saying the event went to LinkedIn. It should be streaming on LinkedIn too. I did set it up that way. I'll check that once I hand it over to Ryan though. Which I'll do right now. Ryan Levander, will you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. I will do my best job to make GA4 not look as bad as it seems on the internet. And I'll help you guys along the way. So I love the informality. Yeah. Ask questions along the way to make sure this is as valuable for you guys as possible. But yeah, I'm Ryan Levander. My agency name is Red Naval Consulting. It's my last name backwards. So it's a smaller boutique agency. We do analytics and testing, and naturally we're doing a lot of analytics right now and holding companies' hands in addition to setting up their analytics as they transition towards D-Day, as I like to say it, as Universal Analytics will go away in I think we're at 20 days now. So that's
getting emails about it.
Right. Google doesn't have a good job of knowledge of, oh, you've already set it up. So we all get the pop-ups right, and the bars and everything. So it's kind of funny. But I could jump into it if that makes sense, Jimmy, or do you want to check on the LinkedIn stream, or are we good?
I am. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. If you don't mind just jumping into it, I am looking on LinkedIn right now, trying to figure that out.
Awesome. Interrupt me along the way if we have questions, and we'll just, I'll dive into a few slides from a structure standpoint, but we'll be pretty hands-on inside of GA4.
Cool.
And let me figure out how to share my screen. Should be pretty straightforward. Oh, great. Let me log in. It's a great time to have my slide deck software say, let's authenticate. So 1 second on that one. So we sent a survey out. We didn't have a ton of responses to the survey, but we had really great feedback of the people that did leave responses. So thanks for doing that. A lot of the pain points were both insightful and pretty commonsensical, what I'm hearing a lot from clients as well too. So we're going to focus on questions like, what are the top blogs that eventually lead to conversions? How do I look at engagement? Because most SaaS sites, it's a page view and it's a conversion, and what's the story in between? So we're going to dive into a lot of those questions today.
Cool.
All right, let me try one more time. Perfect. Should be able to see my screen, and
yes,
we'll dive into it. Cool. So a brief agenda for today is why GA4 isn't as bad as everyone says and thinks it is. So that's going to be part of the topic. Also going to dive into how to think about content from a more strategic standpoint for SaaS specifically. But of course, e-com is generally a little bit easier to measure when the transaction's on the site. But for a lot of SaaS sites, it's a sign up or a form is like the end of the funnel. And so we want to think about how we measure that so we can tell a story in our analytics as opposed to these very, very simple reports that don't always lead to action. And number 3, why the Explore reports and the audiences and segments will be your best friend, and kind of diving into how I think most of the time you should probably use Explore reports, maybe upwards of 90% of the time. They're really powerful. So we'll dive into a lot of those today and make sure you're a lot more comfortable with that. And then obviously questions along the way, maybe they're at the end, maybe they're in the middle. We're just going to make sure we answer as many as possible today. All right. If anyone's a Silicon Valley fan here, probably how most people feel when they log into GA4. The irony is I don't feel like there are less reports and less features, but it's more confusing to people. So this is something that I'm going to help navigate where you should spend your time, and just as important, if not more importantly, where you shouldn't spend your time, what's not going to be the most useful for you. So hopefully I can, by the end of it, make you feel like you're bending a styrofoam bar, not an actual metal bar, because there's a lot to like learn in GA4, and you're not going to be a superhero by the end of this, but you are going to feel a lot more confident about what you can do. And I think the goal for today should be not to take away like 8 things, just take away one thing and do it tomorrow or do it today. And then watch the recording, take away one more thing, and just focus on something simple to start, because it is overwhelming. But it's important, obviously, and using data to inform your decisions is how we all want to be as marketers. I'm not affiliated with Google whatsoever. The reason why I'm an advocate for it, and obviously less of an advocate for GA4 because has been a rough rollout, is mainly because it can do anything that any other tool can do. And I say that because I think there's this misconception of, if I pay for it, therefore it's better. I mean, psychologically, that's how we feel. That's just rooted in human nature. But I want to make sure that you change the mindset of that. And, just because you pay for, there's so many great tools out there. Like I follow a framework. And so whether we use GA4 for these concepts or Piwik Pro, like it's the same concept. But you can do anything in GA4 that any other tool can do. And I constantly say this to my clients, and I'll say, we'll switch as soon as we hit a roadblock and we just can't do something. But it's really, if you understand how to set things up correctly and how to look at things, there are nuances. We'll go over those today, but it can do anything that any other tool can do. And so that's just why I say, don't expect a paid tool to take all your business questions and make them into a built-in report out of the box. You're still going to have to set it up in a custom way. And I'll talk about the 3 Ps of data. I think it's important to just like strategically think about this transition. And I use the word transition and not migration, because I think it's kind of a dangerous word. If you literally migrate what you have already had done in UA to GA4, it would create such a mess for you that you need to start from scratch and set it up in a custom way if you haven't already set up GA4. The page view tag is a start, of course, but obviously you want to set up additional events so that you can understand what people are doing and what should I do about that. So it's a setup. It's not a migration. And I like to think of this as the 3 Ps of data. So project, program, and product. So most of the times this transition is a project. It's generally a one-time thing. But after that, you're going to have other questions that you want to answer with your data in GA4. And that's part of the data program that hopefully you are creating for your clients or creating in your business. I like to say, as soon as your questions stop being asked, then that's when you can stop updating GA4. So hopefully you're constantly evolving the reports and you're making them more and more useful over time. And then the ultimate sort of tier to get to, hopefully we can aspire to get to this, is a data product. To me, that means it's automated. So, hey, these are my questions I have every day, week, month, quarter, whatever. They're either in GA4 in custom reports, aka Explorer reports, or maybe they're in Looker Studio, whatever you want to do. But they're in a place where I can look at them and make decisions on them and see trends and patterns very clearly. And it's an alert system. And I think this is a really key thing that we will get into. I think that's the one of the next couple slides here. It's a very nice feature in GA4 that's a lot more powerful than Universal Analytics is. They call them insights, but basically you can create custom alerts that says, if my transactions drop by 20% week over week, send me an email, or other aspects of that. But it's pretty powerful so that you can have a system as opposed to going through the weeds and looking for those kinds of things. I'll say some nice things about GA4 because I think it probably has an inferiority complex around the web with all the trash people have been talking about it. And a lot of the bad things are rightfully earned with GA4, but some things are not. So I think the biggest thing of why GA4 became and was needed to update is because it's built for the future. So it's doing a lot of things in the background, like machine learning, that are crucial, especially when we get into like different devices and obviously privacy on the web. Clearly, that's a bit more of a thing in Europe than it is in the US, but it's only a matter of time before it gets here and is more privacy focused. And it's only going to get more and more of a, the rights go to the user, not to the platform. So this is one of the biggest reasons why GA4 was built. You'll notice that you could store your data forever in Universal Analytics previously. Now the longest you can store it is 14 months. So Google doesn't want to own your data. They want you to own your data, etc. So this is that Google's machine learning is starting to think about. And also, I think Google does. YouTube, search, Gmail. They're using this to be able to tie this together with all the other data to understand this isn't, Ryan. They don't know my name, but they know I'm the same user, if that makes sense. Want to make sure my camera, I think my cam switched. So let me just switch that to,
Yeah, it did just switch over. Riverside. Maybe we'll use AirMeet next time.
let me, I don't see an option for, I'll just do camera off for now, and then I'll switch it back whenever I can use it. I don't want to slow it up, but should be able to see my
Cool.
screen still. So this is what I talked about alerts and anomalies being quite useful. And I'm just going to jump over into Google Analytics just to show you guys where this is. It's kind of hard to find. And I think we should just set up the one that I just mentioned. So let me switch the tab over to a different one. So I will share the GA tab. So technically, you don't have transactions on the site, I guess, technically, if you signed up for SuperPath Pro. And all these examples are going to be with SuperPath's GA4 account. So that was, I think, stated in the kind of the description, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So it's familiar to most of all of you. Honestly, I think there might be a different way to get to the insights. I always just type in, as you can see, insights here. And this existed in Universal Analytics, but this is a lot better in GA4. And again, this is largely AI driven. And previously in Universal Analytics, it would say something, it's very, very useful. Like your traffic from Japan has dropped by 800% week over week. It's like, oh yeah, it went from like 3 to 8. So that's really useful. But this is getting a lot better. And honestly, like most things in GA4, I would set it up custom and you could create your own. So that's what we're going to do here. And it can guess what you care about, but when you tell it what you care about, that's where the real power is. So for most people, it's probably going to be most relevant to do weekly because they probably haven't set up their GA4 in the right fashion long enough to make sense of the monthly, and daily would be a little bit too noisy. And then you can also create a segment. So you could say when my organic traffic drops week over week by more than, actually, let's set up that one. That makes a lot of sense. So I think it probably is. So first user medium, and I'm going to just say organic. So that's only what we're going to be looking at in this segment. It's not all users, it's just organic traffic. And we will say total users. You could say it might be beneficial to set up 2 of these. The anomaly is going to give it into the hands of Google, and it's going to say, oh, there's an anomaly based on my machine learning. It'll just tell you what it guesses. I probably would start by setting up percent decrease by more than, I would look at your historical data to make sense of this. I'm just going to say 20% to start, and then week over week. And then you can get an email. I'll just send it to myself since I have a quick shortcut for my email, but that's basically going to send an email, and then you create this. And now we've just created a custom insight. I think it's just a matter of reloading the page and it will show up here. And now I'm going to get emailed when this happens. And I think this kind of comes back to that data product system of once you can always just start by guessing, and you pretty quickly calibrate like, oh, 20% is actually way too high. I want to know if it's 5%. And you pretty quickly understand what you care about when you look at your historical data. But then you can kind of I like to think of it as like a speedometer, right? Of like, I want to know when I'm speeding or when I'm going too slow so that I can actually act on the data, which is really the whole point of data, should be to act on it. So that's an example of how you can kind of put this to work for you. So it's a little bit less of checking reports, and over time, it's more the alert system I was talking about. Let me switch back over to some slides here. All right. So those are the anomalies and alerts. Quite useful. I think I added, this is a really good tool called GA-Insights. The problem with the built-in anomalies and alerts, the built-in alerts in GA4 is that you only can choose from certain dimensions and metrics. Like if you set up a custom lead generation event, like signed up for SuperPath Pro, you can't turn that into an alert. It's just one of the limitations of GA4. But you can use this tool, GA Insights. I just found out about them like 3 weeks ago. One of my clients told me about it, and I'm like, oh wow, how did I not know about this already? Very, very cool. You can set up any custom custom event as an alert, and it gets sent to Slack even better. So you could get a daily, weekly, however cadence you want it, alert. This is a screenshot from that saying, hey, your new users are down, your sessions are up, and you can, most importantly, the things that you really care about, signups, leads, etc. You can do that here. So pretty cool. Works with not just GA4, Search Console, ads, etc. So a pretty nice tool to look at. This is a lot of text in this slide. I'm just going to dive into the difference between an audience and a segment. I'll share these slides afterwards, which I think was the intent behind, clearly classifying this. And I also wrote this with ChatGPT, so I'll just go ahead and say that out loud. But I highlighted the two important things here, the bold of the important things here. So the biggest thing is with audiences and segments is that segments are retroactive when you create these. And the biggest reason why you would want to create these in the first place is you could say sequential things like they viewed a blog and then they submitted a lead, or they signed up they did basically a conversion, and whatever you classify a conversion as. So segments are retroactive, which is great if you want to look backwards and you set it up at that time. Audiences are not. They're not retroactive. So they start when you set it up. Why you'd want to use an audience, so you could say, why not just use segments if they're retroactive? That's a good point. Audiences are useful for being able to use in Looker Studio as well. I think a lot of people will see some limitations in the built-in reports or the custom reports, the Explore reports in GA4, and you'll say, yeah, this is kind of useful, but there's only 6 charts, and some of these the way these work together, these metrics and dimensions aren't super useful. I probably want to use Looker Studio, and I actually built one for SuperPath. We'll look at that at the end. You can use audiences, and audience name is what it's called in Looker Studio, but you can't use segments there yet. I think it will be coming, but that's just the reality of where we're at right now with these. So I think that's going to be a good jumping off point to dive into, again, more of the GA interface of the reports, of the Explore reports. But yeah, I'll pause if there's any questions along the way so far, Jimmy.
Yeah, there's a couple that I think would make sense to chat through right now. One was about Looker Studio, and you sort of touched on this, but when to use Looker Studio versus the Explore reports. So are there other considerations there that folks should be thinking about?
Yeah, it's a good question of when to use Looker Studio. I like to say GA is, I'm a pretty big fan of Looker Studio personally, because there's more chart types and it's just easier to show trends and patterns over time. I like to say if it's a recurring question, then put it into Looker Studio, because you're going to want to be able to see that in a more granular view and do more things with that. If it's an ad hoc question, then that's probably good to literally explore, which is what we'll be looking at in GA4. Explore that first. And definitely start in GA4, because the scoping is going to be a pretty big issue in GA4, unfortunately. If you wanted to say, show me total users by conversions, oh no, I should be using sessions instead of total users. You don't know if they're going to be compatible or not, and use those in GA4 first to find out if they work together before you spend a lot of time in Looker Studio and you're like, oh, well, why don't these work? Why is my report saying it's broken? So spend the time of exploring in the Explore reports in GA4 first, and then build that into Looker Studio is a good advice as well.
Cool. That's awesome. That's great. And there was one other question about the alerts. Dee asked, can the alerts pull absolute numbers? So like if you have an increase or decrease of, 1,000 page views or some other absolute number, can it function that way too?
It could function that way. Yeah, I usually find almost always I'm going to do in percentages. But yeah, if you wanted to say if we have less than 100 leads, is that that the question is?
Sorry,
a raw number.
I misinterpreted the question. No, is there a way to say, could it just pull numbers from like the last week? Like how many page views did you have in the last week? Not necessarily comparing it to previous weeks.
You could. Well, I guess then I'm like, the question would be, what's the reference point, and what would you want to compare that? What would you want to get alerted about, I guess, is the question. Probably if it's above or below a certain point, then I would imagine more than likely.
Sounds like just sort of like, is there, sorry, Didi. Is there a way to do automated weekly reporting, essentially, where you could set up the numbers you want to track and then get an email on a weekly basis that pulls those numbers?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's see if we can do that. Let's create a new one and say weekly. And if it's just a metric and let's use the total users as the example. Yeah, is less than or equal to. So you could say whatever you care about. Let's just say 100. If it's more than 100 or less than more than 99, there you go. More than 100
Got
users
it.
came in, etc.
So you
Yeah.
always do have to have some reference point. You can't just say, I mean, I guess you could say more than zero.
You'd have to know what you want to get alerted about,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Yeah. Good question. For sure. Any more or keep rolling?
Well, Didi follow up about that one is what about GA Insights? Is there a way that we could create alerts through that to get some form of automated weekly reporting?
Absolutely. That's really what it's for. The tool was built for more customization of an alert system. You can get an email, you can get it in Slack and Microsoft Team, whatever you're using, it can meet you where you're at, but you could infinitely customize that. And even like I mentioned, also with like Search Console or ads, other places as well.
Got it. Got it. One other just quick thing I'll throw in, which is not exactly related to GA4, but we set up Fathom Analytics on our site. They are a partner. We pay for our account though; it's not free. One of the things I like best about it actually is their weekly report. So every week I get an email. That's the primary way that I interact with Fathom. I don't really log in all that often. I'm sure there's ways, probably very fancy and sophisticated ways to set it up in GA as well. But the Fathom ones are super simple. And that's like my weekly gut check. Tells you how many page views, how many events, and then compares it to the previous week.
Awesome. Yeah. Lots of great tools out there. And the point is, how can I get insights faster so that I can make a decision if I want to take action or just keep on like, hey, business as usual, So
Yeah.
100%. Awesome. I will dive into the Explore reports and just kind of the basic interface of GA4 here. I think we're all used to the reports here. And this is probably one of the bigger pain points of GA4 in relation to UA is there's less reports and most people probably find them less useful because there's just more education that needs to happen to make them useful. It is nice that you can customize what you see where in the library, but honestly, I feel like if you're going to go to that level of effort, then you should probably just use the Explore reports. So just as a frame of reference, obviously I'm coming at it from a more of a clearly a power user and standpoint, and we do this for clients, but I probably spend 90% of my time in Explore reports building these out. And then, for the reports here is really high level stuff. Like it's, hey, here's an anomaly. Like this is what these are showing. This is actually from a tool. It's called this one's called Crystal Ball Insights, which as you might know that annotations are gone in GA4. And so this solves that problem of adding annotations and being able to catch things you may not be able to catch so that the analysis is easier of like, oh, why did we spike? Why did we drop? So that's another little helpful tool maybe to think about. But I usually use these general reports for like really high level, like when I first get access to an account, start to look back here, do some exploratory work, but then I'm pretty quickly moving into Explore reports. Obviously advertising is nice from the Google Ads standpoint, but I'm usually using a lot of the Explore reports and then obviously Looker Studio to supplement that. One report I will share because it was kind of my go-to you can always call it GA3 for the sake of clarity, but for GA3, I used to like I think a lot of us like the source medium report, right? So acquisition, source medium, and then you could understand what were my conversions. So this is by default going to be channel grouping, but you could just switch it to source medium. I feel like that gets into more of the specificity besides the super broad view of channels. And then the concept in GA4, as you guys probably know by now, everything is an event. So then which of your events have you marked? You have to mark it in the back end as a conversion event, previously known as a goal in GA3. So then you could say, okay, I want to see generate leads, and then which traffic sources are leading to generate leads. In Jimmy's case, it's signing up for Slack or joining Superpath Pro or signing up for the newsletter. So we could show you more granularity, figure out like which one of those exactly, but we could then just sort by the generate leads and quickly see what are the session traffic sources that are leading to that. So a pretty quick way to obviously get a pretty quick high view of how that high level view of how that's working. But to really get into the granularity of it, you're going to want to get into the Explore reports. I will say if you're working with like a really high traffic accounts, a high traffic property, or you're starting to use more like segmentation and get into the really fine tooth like magnifying glass, you're going to want to make sure your reports are not sampled. This is the check mark, so it's not sampled, but if it is, if you're looking back for like large date ranges or really granular things, you might see some sampling. Then it will tell you, hey, this is 40% sampled. And then you might want to take your analysis with a grain of salt to make sure it's not too much decision making is going on back there.
Will it tell you that? Will it flag it for you?
It will tell you what percent is sampled. Yeah. If it wasn't 100%, it will tell you the percentage here. Yep, exactly. Another reason to store your data in BigQuery, you don't have to do anything with it, but it is valuable to own your data and to be able to have the actual accuracy of it. So they make it easier for you. Of course, this is Google earning money when you store your data in BigQuery, but there are many other tools out there that make your data useful after it's in BigQuery. So BigQuery is just a spreadsheet that never runs out of space and you pay for it. The storage is honestly very, very cheap in BigQuery. You probably will never spend more than $20 a month at the absolute most. I would guess based on Jimmy's data here, it'd be like $5 to $6 a month. I pay much less than that. I have much less data. You really pay more for the querying costs, but there's tools, Analytics, Canvas, Supermetrics. There's probably going to be 3 more this week that make it easy so you don't have to be a SQL ninja to be able to answer questions in Looker Studio. One of the nice benefits of using BigQuery in Looker Studio is your reports will load so fast, and of course it won't be sampled. So that's just the reality of, again, Google doesn't want to own your data. They want you to own it. And this is basically that route. All right, let's dive into Explore reports because I feel like that's going to be where a lot of the value is going to come today. I will show an example answering the question, how do we understand, and I'm actually going to reset up this segment. So how do we understand what blogs are leading to conversions? I think that's a question for a lot of people. We're all content marketers here, SEOs of some nature. We're putting great content out in the web. I mean, traffic views are great, but it elevates the business case to your clients or your business when you can say these are actually leading to tangible events or engagement or conversions. So there's different ways to look at this back here. In terms of charts, I would always just start with a free form and keep it simple. I want to just look at the structure of things. I'm kind of a spreadsheet guy naturally, but I think everyone should start with just a free form. And then you can look at different ways to, we're going to get into some funnels and some line charts, obviously over time that answers that question, but just start with something simple so you can just understand these are the metrics and dimensions, and this makes sense in my mind, and therefore I want to start to explore different ways to look at it. So these are, they call these variables and then the tab settings. It's a little bit confusing terminology, but basically if you want to add in new dimensions, you're just going to want to add in things back here. Let's say we cared about device category. I just start typing in things and then that way it just filters it down for me. Then you have to import this. And then, so now we see device category back here. And pro tip, if you want to add this to the report, as you could see, this didn't add device category here. You'll have to add it to the tab settings. You can just double click and it will automatically then add it for you. Obviously that makes it kind of messy and not super useful. But then you could even say a different way to look at it is I want to look at like a breakdown, nested rows, and I want to nest like device category in a different way. Different way to look at this. I'm going to remove this for now and go back to the original question of how I wanted to look at this. Yeah, you could see device category added up here now, but not exactly useful. We do this. Yeah, that's what I want. Nested rows is helpful, so we don't need it to repeat basically. Okay, so we want to answer the question. This is great. We see, because it's relevant for Jimmy's case, for a lot of SaaS sites too, where they have subdomains and different sites, support.docs. We want to know what is the actual host name technically of the landing page path here. So we see the blogs coming in via Superpath, and we want to know what of these blogs, it's getting sessions, great, but what led to an actual conversion? And again, in Jimmy's case, it's either a newsletter sign up, joining the Slack community, or a Superpath Pro join. So we're going to create a segment, and I'm going to just delete this one. So I start from scratch and do it with you guys. So going to add a segment here. Remember, this is going to be retroactive, this segment, audiences or not. And where you use audiences is actually, you could filter via an audience name down here. I'll show that later, but we'll just start with a segment for now. So in this case, this kind of gets into this, you'll hear me say scoping. You probably already heard me say this. It's important to think about of like what I mean by scoping is, I want to know if they viewed a blog at any point in time based on my date range. In this case, I think it's last 7 days. So let's just say we're looking at 30 days back. In the last 30 days, I want to know if they viewed a blog at any point in time, and then in a new session later down the road, maybe they viewed a blog on the first day of the month, and then the middle of the month they converted. I want to know if that blog led of the awareness of the blog of the traffic led to a conversion. That would be a user segment because they didn't do it in the same session. It's a little bit of a loose and like a full view of attribution, but you may want to look at it that way. If you want to know, did they view this blog and then immediately take an action on that same session? That would be a session segment. And an event segment would be a bit more granular if you wanted to look at like blog views and then scroll depth. So on that exact page, they view the blog and I want to know, did they scroll halfway down or all the way down, etc. So that's the scoping levels of user is basically a device is how I think about it. Session is a person coming to the site and all the pages they viewed in that session. And then event is on the page itself. How far do they scroll down these blogs, etc. I'm going to use a user segment so we can understand how many people viewed the blog and then eventually took an action, but at a later time. So it's basically bound to whatever date range you have here. So a tip is to use these sequential options. So you could see the 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's what we want to look at here. I'm just going to delete this first one so we can see step 1. And then I'm going to put in landing page and query string. And I'm going to add in /blog. If you don't have that in your URL structure, that's a whole nother can of worms, but just be aware of what classifies a blog. In this case, Jimmy has that. Second step, so now we see step 2, and this says indirectly followed by, which usually is the case. It's not always linear. Usually, going back to SaaS examples, they viewed a blog. Oh, I want to check out the pricing. Now I want to sign up. It's usually not a linear path like e-commerce where it's product page view, add to cart, etc. It's not, if only. I like to say it's like cooked spaghetti. The user journey, it's all mushed together, whereas e-commerce is more uncooked spaghetti. It's pretty linear. So it's helpful to think about, I think. And then I'm going to say event name, and I want to see the event name that contains generate lead, and I'm going to apply. And notice how this updated. So it was like 600 and some people, and it shows you right here how many % of users. And then at that time, you can also build an audience, which I'd say when in doubt, check this. I don't think there's technically a limit on the number of audiences, but mainly because this starts when you build it, right? From an audience standpoint. And again, you can use audiences in Looker Studio. You can't use segments in Looker Studio. So if you want to look at this in Looker Studio, you're going to want to build an audience here. And this is basically how many days people need to be in this segment, will stay in this segment. So based on 30 days, they'll be staying in this audience segment, basically. And I'll say blog traffic that converts. And then I'll save and apply. And now we see the 3 blogs that led to conversions. So that's an example of being able to granularly look down at what are those blogs that led to conversions. And I may want to have this actually makes it really easy to just duplicate. So maybe I want to say, okay, let me just duplicate that quickly. And maybe the first tab here, these tabs are kind of nice as well. Maybe I want to just remove this. So this is the traffic, and then these are the conversions. So now I can kind of have this back and forth and look, okay, cool. What are the ones that lead to conversions, basically? I kind of went through a lot there fast. So I want to pause to make sure that makes sense because it's a pretty important concept in GA4.
Yeah, folks have questions, drop them now. Two quick things I'll queue up for you at the moment though, Ryan. I'm trying to make it full screen so folks can see it more clearly. It sort of works, but I'm not totally sure it's working properly. If you zoom in 1 or 2 clicks, I think that would help. And there was one question I wanted to queue up for you as well, which was, Katie asked, when setting up an insight to understand dips in traffic, do you recommend looking at total users or page views or something else?
It's a good question. It kind of depends on what you want to have answered. So if it's, again, kind of like we were talking about this, it kind of comes back to the scoping thing I was just talking about. So if it's, if you're looking over larger periods of date ranges, you're probably going to want to use total users, which is again, total devices. Think about users as a device standpoint. If I want to know, did my blog, of the like segment we just set up, did my blog traffic conversions drop month over month? You're going to want to use total users for that view into that. If you want to know if your just blog traffic in general drops, like if you have a daily spike from like a PR release, then I would say you want to look at sessions because that's just the actual pure number of page views in that respect.
Got it.
So I would think about how you want to measure that and get a little bit more of the end result, basically.
Got it. Okay,
it's
cool.
A great question.
A few other questions came in. Do you want to just tackle a few of these now?
Sure, absolutely.
See, John asked, a lot of these seem to be native to the events that come with the web page. How do we integrate other event data and harmonize users if we are sending data from Segment, for example?
Great question. I will speak to setting up custom events, which is basically the question, whether you do it with Segment or in the interface of GA4, you technically can set up in the back end of GA4. I'll show that. I think really the way to do this is through Google Tag Manager. It's a pretty definitive answer nowadays. Like it used to be a nice to have in Universal Analytics. Like if you had Tag Manager skills that really leveled up your measurement like nothing else would. Nowadays, I don't think it's a nice to have anymore. I think it's required. Like you really need to do that. It's crucial. And it doesn't need to be like this elaborate system, and super complicated. Honestly, like I use ChatGPT a lot for a lot of the, hey, I'm a subject matter expert, so I know what's right and what's wrong. But I think you'll pretty quickly understand, oh, generate some regex for me so I can filter by these pages. And I never write regex anymore as an example. So
That's
like I
an awesome
think
idea.
there's a lot of tools out there. I have it write data layers for me all the time. Like, let's use that example of, let's say if you didn't have URLs in your blog structure and you had to try to figure out, these are blog pages, you could even let ChatGPT browse your blog and say, what should I use in the URL structure, not in the URL structure, in the data layer? How can I filter these blogs out to understand that? So you can basically kind of put it to work for you in some ways as well. So you have to know what's right, what's wrong, of course, but it can be helpful. So technically so back here are the events. Like you could modify or create your own events back here. Let's do the last 7 days. So it's going to be limiting us in terms of like what you can do back here based on certain things. There's also the data stream back here. So this enhanced measurement allows you to set up scrolls and outbound clicks and site search. And honestly, it's a great start if you don't have experience with Tag Manager to check some of these boxes, and it will do it for you. Some of the ways it does things like scroll depth, if you check this, it'll track 10% and 90% scroll and nothing in between. So it's kind of like, what's your logic there, Google? But it's better than nothing. But I'll show an example of, I'll just switch tabs to Google Tag Manager to how to set up events that actually make sense and kind of how to think about setting up events. So, and I'll zoom in here. So Jimmy, I set up navigation clicks for you because we want to know, because some of the times there's the same link in the header as there is in the footer, right?
Yeah.
And like an example is content services. You could click that in the header, in the footer, same with blog. So I want to know where are they clicking in the navigation. So when you set up an event in GA4, it's create a new tag. It's an event here. You only set up the configuration once, then you set up the event. And I'm just saying I wanted to, link to the already config tag I set up. It's a click. Don't try and go crazy with your event names. You only get a certain amount, so just be careful with those. You can add a lot more context here with the event parameters. So here's the magic question to ask yourself with these. What do I care about when someone clicks, in this case, the superpath navigation? What do I want to know? All right, well, I first want to know the location. This last one was, where are they clicking? And it basically was able to, write some CSS classes to be able to say, oh yeah, this would be top. It was honestly very easy to look at, oh, this is a top nav versus a bottom nav. But what else do I care about? I want to know what domain they're on. Is it a subdomain? Is it the main domain? What is the actual URL they're going to? So where are they clicking to? Where are they when they click to go to that page? Are they on the home page? Are they on a blog? And then what is the click text they're clicking to, so we could better understand all of this. Now let me show this in GA so we can actually see, okay, cool. That's a bunch of nerdy tag manager stuff. How does this look in Google Analytics to actually make it useful? Let's go back to the Explorer reports. I think it was under explorations. Maybe it was the content funnels. Here's header clicks. So this is in the last, let's choose it 7 days. So just starting simple, I just want to know what's the click text. Here's my, zoom in a little bit. Here's my click name in the row. People are clicking job board the most, and then blog, and then Superpath Pro. And that's to start in the header. And then I could look in the footer. It's like, what are the things that people click in the footer that we may want to move to the header if there's a lot of clicks in these, as an example, right? But like, here's some of the actual clicks here. And I could add more if I wanted to. What are the pages they're on when you might want to nest some of these so it doesn't look as messy. But like, you could understand, let's do like destination. And let's just remove some of these. So here's the footer clicks, and they're going to these. Maybe I want to know where they're actually, the page they're on when they click these. Click page. So this might be a bit more useful to say they're on the, clicking the about, and they were on these pages when they clicked the about page, as an example. So different ways to slice and dice and look at this, basically.
That's super interesting.
The TLDR is definitely to use Tag Manager because it's getting better and better and easier to use, and it's not as intimidating as it used to be. And if you learn Tag Manager, honestly, like, you will pretty much goes back to my comment of GA4 can do anything any other tool can do. And if you know how to set it up, it's only going to be as good as your setup. So.
Got it. Can I throw a few more questions at you?
100%.
Okay. Let's see. Rob asked, how do you filter down to a specific conversion rather than all conversions in Explore?
Yeah, great question. I'll jump back into that. So let's go back to that. And pro tip, name your explorations so you actually know which ones are which. If you don't, it'll just say a bunch of untitled and they're not super useful. So let's go back to that converting blogs scenario and to pull in. So we would want to know the, I believe it was the event. So I will say that of your events you set up, you need to add them as custom dimensions in order to use them in the Explorer reports. You could set up an event, and if you don't create a custom dimension, you won't see it in the Explorer report. So that's super important to know and to realize. So that's how you would first be able to use them back here. So let me go back into these. So you can see there's quite a few dimensions back here, but I'm only using these two. And I think I need to go back to the other content explorations. Great. So, and when you add this, you can see here's all my custom ones that I added. If I wouldn't have added these, that's where you're going to see them at. So I believe the one that's going to show, I believe it's the RS name. Let me just add all of these because I'm not sure which one I'm going to use. Yeah, that should be it. And I believe it's this one. And I just double clicked to add these. And let me do this one. And then it should show, let me remove these segment here. And actually it might be useful to look at the event name. And this is, some of the times this is where I kind of have a jumping off point of Explorer reports into Looker Studio. Looks like we have the event name here.
Hey, Ryan, just to clarify, you create the event in Tag Manager and then you create the buckets to contain them in GA4. That was a quick follow-up question.
You create the events in Tag Manager, and then every event will show back here, literally everything. So two things, you can then check which ones you want to check as a conversion event, aka a goal. And then the second thing, if you want to use these events in an Explore report, you're going to need to create a custom dimension in order to use them.
Got it. Okay.
So hopefully that makes sense. And I think what's maybe most useful to the people, I'll probably create a follow-up loom because I know we have like 10 minutes left on the filtering down the event name. Basically, I've already done this in Looker Studio, so I'd like to jump over to show a little bit of that because it's basically answering the exact question of what the question was, like what are the conversion names basically. So this was all done using the native GA4 connector. It used to be a lot harder to connect GA4. They used to say you can only use this much data via the API, yada, yada, yada. It basically wasn't easy to connect. Now it's a lot easier. So you don't have to go the painstaking route via BigQuery and all the stuff I talked about before. It's a lot more easy for everyone to use. So that's the good news. So this is looking at users to the site. This is event. I clarified the definitions here. So total event count. And then this is the leads here. Let me just I'll maybe zoom in here a little bit and remove one of these. So what I did here is I took this scorecard and this scorecard, I right clicked and I blended the data, and that's what gave me the conversion rate here. So that's the way to basically blend data with itself, so to speak, to understand the conversion rate. And then I can filter by anything I wanted to. So show me organic search only, and then your conversion rate updates. Show me leads over time, and show me then the leads themselves in here. So that's the RS name that I was looking at in the Explorer report. It's just an easier way to look at what are the actual conversions here. And then the cool things about this, like I just set up these leads like in the last week, so there's not a ton of data, but once you start to look at greater time periods, you could do what's called scrub along this report, and you could just look at this, and now it only filters by, hey, what were these spikes this week? And then you could basically look at all your data in that respect. I would need to add a date to these dimensions as well too. But it's, as you could see, like Looker Studio, they give you so much more flexibility with like what to look at. As an example, this is looking at let's just look at yesterday, and it will always compare based on whatever your date range is. So it's always going to look at the previous period. So we're down 68% of leads compared to the day before yesterday, right? It's like Wednesday compared to, or Tuesday compared to yesterday. So it's pretty dynamic and it's pretty visually apparent how to see and understand things. And then I have, like, from a hierarchies perspective, I have channel, medium, and source here. So you could say, obviously, like if you say email, then like, well, okay, if you're UTMing things, then you could say, okay, show me newsletters, and then how many are signing up as a result, et cetera. Usually I like to turn these into zeros, so it looks like nothing's broken. It's just a matter of there's no data for that. But yeah, that's a way you can actually put the data to work more for you in a more visually appealing way, so that you can take action faster in Looker Studio as opposed to the GA4 Explorer reports.
A quick follow-up question, Ryan. Two people are asking, do the Explorer reports only let you go back a certain amount of time? Katie says it's not letting me go further back than April 8th, and we switched to GA4 earlier than that.
Interesting question. I kind of would come back and ask what dimensions and metrics are you trying to look at? Maybe like an event wasn't set up if you're looking at something custom, but if it's just built in metrics and dimensions, that's kind of interesting. I would maybe look at, was there an implementation of a code error or something like that? You should be able to look at almost infinitely back in Explorer reports. So yeah, that's a good question.
Interesting. Yeah, she posted the error she got, which says, date range in this exploration has been adjusted in order to continue providing valid data. Ranges in this exploration must contain dates between April 8th and yesterday. If one of your segments contains user data, your date range is automatically limited to 93 days from your start date.
I think I know what could be going on. It's hard to like troubleshoot without full context, but I would make sure, Katie, that back here, your data settings, data retention, make sure this is checked to 14 months and not 2 months if it's a user level aggregation. And Jimmy, hey, can I change this for you while I'm back here?
Please. Yeah, please.
Cool, cool.
Thanks.
Basically, this means it'll, after 2 months, if it's a user level metric, it will stop collecting data. So you literally will only be able to look back X amount of time. So
Got it.
that could be one of the things. Yeah.
Great. That's awesome.
I'll bill you later, Jimmy. No worries.
Yeah,
I'm not
thank,
changing this
thank
little
you so
flip down
much for
here.
doing this. This is awesome. Um,
I'm messing with you.
a couple other questions came in. See, someone asked, is there a good source for templates for custom views and custom segments? Like, are there pre-built versions of this that you can just plug and play with?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you actually create a segment, there are some templates. Honestly, they're not super useful. Let's go back into an Explore report and create, let's just do a blank one. And then let's look at the segments. So you get this dialog here basically of here's the built-in ones. So when you set up your GA4 account and it asks you what category is your business relating to, this is where this becomes more and more important. I think one of the only ones they had templates for initially was like gaming industry. So if like you were a gaming website, basically that meant they had a lot of pre-built reports for you already out of the box. So make sure whatever category you're choosing, maybe double check to make sure it's relevant, because obviously then you're going to get more useful reports back here. I've honestly never really used these. I would say that if you have quite a bit of data and you have clean data, these start to become more useful. Any of the times this icon is showing up, it's basically AI, machine learning. So if you are an e-commerce site, if you have a site where people, purchase on a recurring basis, some of these might make sense to start to look at, but you have to have quite a bit of data for that to make sense. So you generally will probably just want to set up your own segments back here to be able to, kind of understand that. You can also exclude people. So I think that's important too, to be able to say like how many people. Let's just do, so page location is they don't have to land on your blog, but they just view a blog. So they viewed a blog at some point in time, and then maybe we would say, and they didn't ever view, let's do another page location. Let's just pretend Jimmy had a pricing, or, let's just say it's the homepage. Exactly matches here. So this would basically say how many people landed on a blog and never went to the homepage. Use this how it makes sense for you. Maybe it's they didn't view the pricing page, etc. You could build an audience and you could remarket to these people. You could just consume this data. So it doesn't just have to be inclusion. It could also be, hey, people that didn't do this. So it's a couple different ways to look at these things as well.
Cool. That is awesome. I'm just going to keep hitting you with questions if that's cool, Ryan.
Totally.
See, Stephen asked, you mentioned BigQuery earlier. Can you quickly walk through how that pipeline works? Looks like he wants to set up Google Search Console to BigQuery, then pull in BigQuery into GA4. Is that possible?
Yeah, so it would be a one direction method. So I'll just go back to BigQuery here. So the benefit of BigQuery is not just you own your data and you can have accuracy. The A word is usually kind of a not really known thing in marketing analytics. It's not usually accurate, but it would be in BigQuery because it's not sampled. And you can also join it up with other data. So technically you could say, pull in my GA4 data and then also pull my Search Console data and then, join on the landing page so I can understand what keywords are leading to conversions. That's a common one that you'd probably want to know, right? Or at least what groups of keywords. You wouldn't know the exact keyword, but you get the idea. But BigQuery does not go back into GA4. So it's a one-way street. So when you link your BigQuery here, it doesn't like ingest historical data. So that's something to be aware of. It'll just do the last night's data. And I'm not going to link it for you, but it will basically, you choose a BigQuery project, and then it will say, how often do you want to ingest this, daily, weekly, whatever. But it only goes from GA4 to BigQuery. It doesn't go from BigQuery to GA4. It would go from BigQuery to Looker Studio. And so when you're in Looker Studio, you basically would say, let's just add a piece of data and BigQuery. So now you would link up BigQuery back here, and then that's how you would connect BigQuery to Looker Studio with GA4 data and maybe other data, but that's how that would go.
Got it. That is awesome. Let's see another one for you. Dee asks, could you quickly walk through, sorry, I lost the question. Could you quickly walk through how you would find the number of sessions from organic search to pages in the /blog folder?
Sure. Let me reshare that. Similar, let's do a blank. Well, if it's just number of, yeah, let's build a custom blank report. And so I first start with what do we need to have? And I think while it's annoying to have to set it up custom every time, I think it's a good exercise to go through of, okay, to answer that question, what metrics and dimensions do we need? What information do we need? So if it's just any page view, I would go back to the page location metric. And it's nice that it will hover and tell you what that actually is if you need to clarify that. So I think the question was around just basically sessions to blog traffic. I'm going to grab the host name as well, because knowing Jimmy, he's got a subdomain, and I want to make sure we're clear that this is exactly what we were looking at. And I think those are the only two that we need. And then I'm going to grab sessions here and pull in this. And I'm just going to basically double click on all of these so that they get added to the report. And I'm probably going to want to do the nested rows again. I think it nests the first dimension. Yeah, so if I switch these, that would make sense. So I would want to nest by the host name. So now we could see super path, and it looks like we need to add a filter so that we're looking at, so here's a filter we could add, and, or excuse me, want a filter on the page location. And I would just say contains a blog. And I would just do that. And now we're looking at blogs here. And I mentioned audiences before. So if you wanted to use an audience in here, you could add audience. So as name, audience name. Let me just type in audience name. And now I could filter by, so let's say we wanted to go even deeper besides just blogs. Actually, let me double check what audiences I have set up. And the interesting thing here is that they only allow exactly matches, but I think it does show sometime. There we go. Superpath Pro. I forget what this audience was. Aware. So like this audience I set up. Yeah. So I'm glad I named it specifically. They looked at the Superpath Pro page, but they didn't go to the checkout. So this is one of those like exclusions I set up. Looks like no one, but that would be an example of being able to use an audience back here, which again is pretty powerful because you could use those in Looker Studio as well, and not just in the Explorer reports like a segment. So, but hopefully that initial one answered your question.
Amazing. I think we got all the questions. I'm sorry if I missed anything. Ryan, I can't thank you enough. This was extremely informative. A number of people have said in the chat how much they enjoyed this and how helpful it was. So seriously, thank you. We really, really appreciate it. I posted links in the chat to your website, Red Navel Consulting, as well as your Twitter and your LinkedIn. We're going to send an email out afterwards, and we'll make sure all that stuff is linked to. We'll publish the recording. If you're okay with us publishing the slides, we'll publish those as well too.
Awesome, totally. And I guess I'll use this camera to say goodbye. It didn't work the whole time, but at least a little bit of something. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Hopefully it was useful for everyone. And I did mention I'll follow up with, I think, a video on, I'll probably review the recording. I promised something. I will deliver it in a Loom video and Superpath, and happy to help, obviously.
Cool. One other thing I'll tell people, Ryan has been answering a bunch of GA related questions in the Slack group. So if you search GA4 or Google Analytics in the Slack search, you're going to find a bunch of people asking questions, and you're going to find a bunch of answers from Ryan directly. So I imagine probably multiple people having the same issues. So check those out as well. Someone asked for a link to the Slack. Just go to superpath.co/community. That's the best way to get to the Slack. Cool. Again, thank you so much, Ryan. Hope everybody has a wonderful day. Go say hey to Ryan on LinkedIn and Twitter and say thanks. And we'll have to do one of these again soon. Really appreciate it. Cool. Take care, everybody.